I'm working through sound, and I'm interested in how sounds can let us investigate or reflect various things that happen around in the world. And that often means things that happened in the past, or possibly things that will happen in the future. So I see sound as a sort of speculative matter, as a matter for oral fabrications, for oral inventions that might happen within the sonic space. And that can happen working with instruments, that can happen also working with electronics, it can happen with working with different matters and forms of sound. It can also possibly happen without sound, but just thinking through certain aspects and certain qualities that, let's say, our sonic traditions, but also these what I call oral fabrications, can bring out when working and imagining music as some sort of both sculptural, conceptual, and also almost fluid matter that can be shaped and formed into different aspects. And that is an interesting way for me to approach music. So music that can not only happen within a concert space, but can also happen within a space. And the space can be in our minds, in our ears, in our eyes. But it's just this idea of how can we hear the sound in its full capacity, whatever that might mean, in its full resonances, in its full echoes, in its full meanings and connections. Language comes into my work mainly through research, and my music work is really based, research-based. So I spend a long time trying to, figure out what exactly is the piece about, and then the kind of research and the conceptual backgrounds often dictate the elements and the forms and the actual sounds that will find themselves in the work. So language in that sense does not necessarily function as a means of communicating, but more as a means of articulating, means of kind of accentuating. So often language is more of a rhythm and more of a kind of formal device rather than this linguistic construct. So currently for the last year I have been researching this underground, clandestine almost, music making tradition, which is connected to a single word which caught my attention. And this word is shared between different languages, that is Arabic, Farsi, Greek, and Armenian languages. And this word implies a certain strangeness or foreignness. It's a word that's harib. And this word has long been associated with, as I mentioned, underground and less known music making traditions, also illegal substance trade, also certain political dissent traditions. So through this research, I started looking into different historic figures that one or another time throughout the history and also in the contemporary have, in a sense, resonated with this word and with this tradition. Through that, I arrived to the Armenian Greek mystic Gurdjieff, who was one of the first people to bring, let's say, what could be called an Eastern philosophy to the West. He was also called one of the first charlatans within, European psyche. He was also known for making music, and not only making music and dances, but also making music himself with harmonium. So I spent a few months this summer in Paris researching him, trying to find various traces of his. And then in the end, I composed a work which is called 7 Common Ways of Disappearing, which is for retuned and prepared grand piano, 4 hands and electronics. And basically the way I constructed the score was I borrowed this thing which is called an enneagram, which is what Gurdjieff first introduced in the West, and it's this way of dividing the circle into 9 different points in lines. It's often used these days in, let's say, sort of New Age. So the irresistible powers of silent talking came out basically connected to this software that was developed around 4 years ago. The software was called Border Control. It was developed in the Manchester Metropolitan University, working with 3 border patrol agencies in the European Union, and that was Latvia, Greece, and Hungary. And basically what the software was poised to do, it was meant to scan the refugees or migrants or travelers' faces as they enter into the European Union, and based on their facial microexpressions, give them a certain score which would indicate whether they're being truthful or deceitful about their intentions and background. What was interesting was the fact that the way that the Border Control taught their algorithm. They used 32 actors, 16 of which were invited to tell the truth, 16 of which were invited to tell a lie. So the whole thing was already constructed as some sort of like theatralics. It almost is, Brechtian in nature, because especially like the questions themselves, they're like, what is your name? What is in your bag? If we call your relatives, will they confirm your identity, and so forth. So this idea of kind of imagining complex notions of truth-telling, of deceit, as binary, codable notions kind of really caught my attention. And that's what goes on behind this new installation. It's two-channel installation and 7-channel audio installation. Essentially, in the installation we see the Border Control avatar, which is placed within this abstract background, abstract digital space. And throughout the installation, it gets scanned using a recreated system of micro-expression recognition. And as it gets scanned, and as the system is trying to replicate and figure out whether he's lying or not, the output data is basically output through the sound element. So it was a way for me of kind of like subverting the system itself, but also like almost collapsing it onto itself. And I guess what really was interesting for me was this idea that, again, these really complex notions of truth, of lie, of what is to be responding, both linguistically, both with your face, both sonically, whether that can be coded, and I think it's much more complex than that. And then what are the ways that you can articulate and subvert these things?